Captain Elias Hunter stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the endless stretch of stars. The cold, distant hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the room. His mind was elsewhere, far from the comforts of command. A familiar, yet distant, sensation gnawed at him. It had been there for days, ever since they had picked up the distress signal from the remote planet. The distress signal itself was strange. It wasn't like the usual calls for help, desperate, urgent, and filled with the desperation of the unknown. No, this was different. This one felt almost familiar. The voice, though distorted by static, carried with it an eerie sense of recognition that made Elias uneasy. He shook his head. It was impossible. He couldn't afford to dwell on past ghosts, not now, not when the Federation needed him. "Captain, we're entering the planet's atmosphere," his second-in-command, Lieutenant Dahlia Reeves, said, her voice pulling him out of his thoughts. "It's as we expected, desolate. No signs of life." Elias nodded but didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze remained locked on the screen, watching as the planet's surface slowly came into view. The world was barren, its once thriving cities reduced to rubble. The remains of a lost civilization, now silent and forgotten. It was the last known home of the Vreth, a species that had disappeared centuries ago after a violent conflict with the Federation. The Vreth were not just extinct. They had been wiped out, and their planet had become a relic of a past no one dared to remember. And yet here they were, the Federation's most advanced ship, descending on that same planet. It didn't make sense. The ship's landing gear hummed softly as it touched the planet's surface. Elias stood from his chair, feeling the weight of the moment. There was something about this planet that felt wrong, unnerving. The air outside was thin and dry, the ground cracked and barren. It was a world that had forgotten how to live. "Ready to disembark, Captain?" Dahlia asked, her voice laced with curiosity and caution. Elias hesitated. The memories flooded back. He had been a child when he first encountered a Vreth, and the memory of it felt as distant as the stars themselves. He remembered the creature's large, almond-shaped eyes, the pale green skin that shimmered under the dim light of the alien world, and the scent. Yes, that unmistakable, alien scent that had lingered in his mind for years. He had saved that Vreth child, a creature so fragile and alone, abandoned in the ruins of a once glorious city. He had hidden her away from the Federation, unsure of what to do with her. He had been too young, too uncertain. The Federation had been in the midst of a war, and there had been no room for compassion. The Vreth were an enemy, a threat to humanity. But that child, she had been different. She had looked at him with trust, her eyes wide and full of hope. He had promised to protect her, and then, without even realizing it, he had forgotten about her. The war, the political unrest, everything had swept it all away. She had disappeared just like her people. Now, standing in the ruins of her homeworld, the scent was back. It lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. "Captain," Dahlia's voice brought him back to the present. "You coming?" Elias blinked, pushing the memories aside. "Yes," he said, his voice low. "Let's go." The team made their way through the desolate landscape, their boots crunching on the cracked earth. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional crackle of static from their comms. There was no wildlife, no movement, just the barren remains of a world long since forgotten. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, Elia's unease grew. The familiar scent was stronger now, carried on the wind. His heart raced, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. It couldn't be her. It had to be some kind of trick, a trick of the senses. But then, as they rounded a corner of a collapsed building, Elias froze. There, standing in the shadow of the crumbled stone, was a figure. A woman. Her hair was long, flowing like the dark tendrils of the night, and her skin, though marked by the passage of time, still held that pale green hue. Her eyes met his, and in that moment all the years, all the battles, all the pain of his past seemed to fade away. It was her. Elia's breath caught in his throat. She was real. She was standing right there in front of him, as if she had never disappeared, as if time had never passed. His mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. He felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet, the world tilting on its axis. The woman didn't move. She simply watched him, her gaze steady, as if waiting for something. A recognition, an answer. "Elias," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, yet it echoed through the silence like a distant memory. "You've come back." The name slipped from her lips like a secret, one he had forgotten long ago. It was his name, his real name, not the title of captain or the many ranks he had earned over the years. It was a name that belonged to a child, the boy who had once saved her. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had settled in his mind. "Vela," he finally whispered, the name tasting foreign on his tongue as though it had not been spoken in centuries. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "It's me." The wind picked up, swirling around them as if the planet itself were trying to speak. The air between them crackled with a tension Elias couldn't name. The woman who had once been a frightened, fragile alien child was now standing before him as a woman, as a being filled with power and purpose. Elias took a step forward, his heart pounding. "But you, how?" "I thought you were." He stopped himself, his words lost in the confusion of his thoughts. There were too many questions, too many things that didn't make sense. How had she survived? How had she found him after all these years? Vela stepped closer, her eyes dark with something he couldn't quite read. "You saved me. You promised you would never forget me. And now I need you." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He had promised her. He had promised to protect her, to keep her safe. But that promise had been buried long ago, hidden beneath the weight of his own guilt, his own failures. He had failed so many, and now here she was, standing in front of him as if time had never passed, as if the war, the destruction, had never happened. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Vela's gaze softened, though there was a trace of something darker in her eyes. "You will, but we don't have much time. They are coming." Elia's instincts flared. "Who's coming?" "The ones who want to control everything," she replied, her voice steady but filled with a warning. "The ones who want to use my bloodline to awaken the weapon buried beneath this planet." Elia's mind raced. This was no longer just about a lost child or a forgotten promise. This was about a weapon, something powerful enough to change the balance of the entire galaxy. And Vela, the woman he had once saved, was at the center of it all. The wind howled around them, and Elias felt the weight of everything he had lost, everything he had fought for, pressing down on him. His past, his future, and the fate of the galaxy seemed to hinge on this moment. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. His life and the lives of everyone he cared about would never be the same. Elias stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of questions and confusion. He had saved her long ago. Vela, the alien child he had hidden away from the war, the one whose eyes had never left his thoughts. But now, standing before him as a grown woman, with the same eyes, the same soul, she seemed like a stranger. The wind howled through the ruins of the planet's crumbled buildings, carrying with it the scent of dust and forgotten history. Vela's presence was undeniable, a powerful force that filled the air around them, but something was different. She was not the scared child he had protected. She was something more, something he couldn't quite grasp. "I don't understand," Elias finally said, his voice rough as if the words had been stuck in his throat for too long. "How did you survive? How did you find me?" Vela's gaze softened, though there was a flicker of sadness behind her eyes. "You thought you left me behind," she said, her voice quiet yet strong. "But I never left you, Elias. I couldn't. My people, they're gone, but I've always remembered you." Her words hung in the air between them like an unspoken promise. He had saved her, and she had carried that memory with her through all these years. But what had happened to her? What had she become? "You said they're coming," Elias said, his thoughts shifting back to the immediate danger. "Who?" Vela looked around as if to make sure no one else was listening. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she stepped closer to him. "The ones who want to control me," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The ones who want to use my bloodline to awaken the weapon buried beneath this planet." Elias frowned. "Weapon? What weapon?" Vela hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking toward the ruins of the Vreth city behind her. "The weapon of my people. It's buried deep within this planet, hidden from the universe for centuries, but it can be activated, and if it is, it will change everything." Elias felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The Vreth had been wiped out long ago. He knew that. But what if they had left behind something so powerful that it could shift the balance of the entire galaxy? He had no idea what kind of weapon she was talking about, but he knew one thing for certain. Vela was now at the center of it all. He shook his head, trying to make sense of it. "I don't know what you're talking about. Why you? Why now?" Vela's eyes darkened. "Because my bloodline is the key," she said. "The weapon was created by my ancestors. They built it to protect their people, to ensure their survival. But when the war with the Federation began, they knew it could be turned into a tool of destruction. So they buried it, sealed it away." She paused, and Elias could feel the gravity of the moment pressing in around them. "I am the last of the Vreth royal bloodline," Vela continued, her voice growing firmer. "And now those who seek power have learned that I can awaken the weapon. They will stop at nothing to use me." Elia's heart raced. He had heard rumors of ancient weapons, of weapons so powerful they could destroy entire star systems, but he had never believed them. Now it seemed that the rumors were true, and Vela, the woman he had once saved, was at the heart of it all. He stepped closer to her, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. The Federation couldn't afford to let this weapon fall into the wrong hands. But could he trust Vela? Could he trust the woman who had been absent from his life for so long? "I need to know more," Elias said, his voice urgent. "How do we stop them?" Vela's expression hardened. "We need to find the weapon before they do," she said. "It's buried beneath the ruins of the old city, but it's not just a matter of finding it. The weapon's power is sealed by my bloodline. Only I can unlock it." The weight of her words hit Elias like a punch to the gut. The idea of unlocking a weapon that could destroy everything was terrifying. But there was no time to waste. The Federation, the alien factions, and the enemies who sought to control the weapon were all closing in. "We'll need to move fast," Elias said, his voice low and determined. "We can't let anyone get their hands on it." Vela nodded, her eyes flashing with resolve. "I know, but be careful, Elias. These people are dangerous. They won't stop until they have me or the weapon." Before Elias could respond, a loud crash echoed from the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of blaster fire. He turned quickly, his instincts kicking in. "They've found us," he said, his voice steady. "Get to the ship. We'll make a stand there." But Vela didn't move. She stayed rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on the horizon where a small group of figures appeared, emerging from the ruins like shadows. They were heavily armed, their faces obscured by dark helmets, and they moved with a purpose. "They've already arrived," Vela said, her voice filled with quiet urgency. "We don't have much time." Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. He grabbed Vela's arm, pulling her toward the ship. "We'll make it out of here. Stay close." As they ran through the ruins, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning debris, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. His past, his duty to the Federation, and the fate of the galaxy all seemed to be tangled together in a way that he couldn't unravel. They reached the ship just as the enemy forces began to close in. Elias quickly issued orders to his crew, telling them to prepare for a quick departure. But as they boarded, Vela hesitated, her eyes scanning the horizon one last time. "They won't stop," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll follow us." Elias turned to her, his eyes hard with determination. Then we'll make sure they don't catch us." The engines of the Vanguard roared to life, and the ship lifted off the ground, leaving the ruins of the planet behind. But as they ascended, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they had just entered a larger game, one that neither he nor Vela could fully comprehend. The Federation was still recovering from the last war, and now, with the emergence of the weapon and the secrets of the Vreth bloodline, it seemed that another conflict was inevitable. And Vela, the woman he had once saved, was at the center of it all. Elias sat in the command chair, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. His mind raced with the possibilities. The Federation had enemies, but there were also factions within the Federation itself that sought to control the weapon for their own gain. The stakes were higher than ever before. Vela approached him, her footsteps light on the metal floor. "What now?" she asked, her voice quiet, but the weight of the question hung heavy between them. "We'll make contact with the Federation," Elias said, his voice resolute. "But we'll have to be careful. There are forces within our own ranks that we can't trust." Vela nodded, but Elias could see the doubt in her eyes. She had once trusted the Federation, and now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure who to trust anymore. "We need to stay one step ahead," Elias continued. "If the weapon is real, then we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. We have to find it first." Vela looked out at the stars, her expression distant. "And if it changes everything?" she asked softly. "If it does," Elias said, his voice firm, "then we'll deal with it, together." The ship moved silently through the vastness of space, the unknown stretching out before them. And as Elias sat in the captain's chair, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would test everything he believed in, everything he had fought for. But for now, he had one goal: to protect Vela and stop the weapon from falling into the hands of those who would use it to destroy everything. And no matter the cost, he would do whatever it took to keep that promise.